Welcome to Down to Business with V, a show dedicated to bringing you actionable information to help protect you, your families, your businesses, and the community. I'm your host V, and today we're discussing gone phishing, tales of biting the bait. I brought in a cybersecurity expert from a leader in cyber safety to give you information on how to protect your bank accounts, your investments, and other digital assets. And as always, we'll tell you what to do if you have been a victim. Let's get down to business.
From Atlanta, Georgia, to becoming a United States Marine, to Washington, D.C., and every place in between, everybody calls me V. My goal is to bring you resources, education, and knowledge from sources you can trust that informs and protects to safeguard our families, our businesses, and the community. Now let's get down to business.
Welcome to Down to Business with V. I'm your host V, and today we are talking about gone phishing, tales of biting the bait. We're talking about phishing attempts, what they are, and how malicious actors use them to target you, your businesses, and enterprises and communities as a whole. So today, to bring awareness to the subject, we have in the studio with us Tanya Dudley. She is the Chief Information Security Officer for Cofense. Tanya served as Strategic Advisor for Cofense, the leading provider of protection, detection, and response email security solutions with advanced AI-based automation to stop phishing attacks. Tanya currently serves as CISO, Chief Information Security Officer for Cofense, which has 27 patents, 400 worldwide employees, 5 global phishing defense centers operating 24/7, and more than we can count for their customer count. With over 15 years of cybersecurity experience, Tanya has managed programs in incident response, security awareness, and IT compliance for large global organizations such as Honeywell and Charles Schwab. She is currently an executive committee member for the National Cybersecurity Alliance, working closely with the Department of Homeland Security, with CISA, the Cybersecurity and Infrastructure Security Agency, promoting information security best practices and education to organizations around the world. Welcome, Tanya.
Thanks, and thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for being here today. Tanya, we've heard of several cases where malicious actors use phishing attempts to target victims. We heard of one where the FBI sentenced a fraudster for, carrying out these phishing attempts over internet and email. Another one, a Rhode Island woman was sentenced for targeting political campaign, employees and candidates. And then in a third one, we saw where a man was targeting victims, pretending to be their internet security provider, asking them to reset their passwords. And basically what he did was he got access to their credentials and to the information that was stored in the cloud and compromised their photos on the internet. So very interesting tales of what happens with these phishing attempts. Now, for those that don't know, what is phishing?
So phishing is an email that has malicious intent, right? So it could include a link to direct you to a website to, as you said, put in your credentials, or maybe an attachment that will download some malware. But we see fewer and fewer attachments making it through, at least on the enterprise side. Now, consumer, if you're using your Gmail or some, Gmail does a really good job of filtering that stuff out. I've used Gmail for years, and I have maybe one email that I know that was a phishing attempt. So it does a really good job of making sure, protecting consumers, right, for their personal email. And so by getting you to interact with these, they're either phishing for information, right? So they're trying to get you to interact with them, to give your information, or to install malware. So those are basically the two types of phishing email. There's business email compromise, what we talk a little bit about, but that's really trying to get you to engage in a conversation, to elicit you to send funds or money. So those are kind of the types of phishing threats that we see, either from an organization or even from a consumer standpoint.
Yes, and a lot of what we saw and discussed in our previous season was the email phishing attempts, them sending links to the potential victims, hoping that they would click on it, sending them to a spoofing website or some other type of site, and those credentials being harvested. Very interesting how these malicious actors will carry out these the threats, but the goal is to get the victim to click something, to receive their credentials so that they can either receive funds or access to some other type of information.
Yeah, like any other criminal, right? It's always about the money, right? 9 times out of 10, that is what about. Now, when we're talking about nation states, that's a whole different other aspect, right? And we do see some crossover to, trying to target an individual to make their way in. But at the end of the day, for consumers, it's really about, they're going after your money, right? And if they're going after your information, it's then to further their targets, to target maybe somebody else. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's going after information or that money.
Yes, and we also hear terms like vishing and smishing, where those are targeting the victim with other types of solicitations, smishing being the SMS text messages that they'll send out with links in it to basically do the same.
Yeah, so really at the end of the day, it's all phishing. It's just the medium where it's sent from, right? If it's an email or if it's your text message or if it's a voice text or a voicemail, right? At the end of the day, it's phishing. They're phishing for information.
Absolutely, and I love that you break down phishing for information.
Right.
These are terms that, in the cybersecurity, information security conversations, we use quite loosely, not realizing that maybe the consumer does not know why you're calling it phishing. What do you mean?
Right.
And that breaks it down very simply.
And we've done a really good job over the last 10 years, right, where we really have highlighted this. If you're working in an organization, you're getting training on what that is, and then we give you information I know when I did security awareness training, I'd always had, individuals that would say, well, okay, but what can I give my friends and family, right? So I would direct them to the Stay Safe Online website. There's lots of content there. So I think it's becoming more common knowledge now that people know what phishing is, right? We don't have to explain it as much as we did 10 years ago, but everyone is still being targeted.
Yes, for sure. But you'd be surprised at some of the conversations I have where people are like, what?
Well, so now we have this aging generation that's now online that maybe they didn't grow up with it versus our young ones that they've grown up with it. They've always known it, right? So that's a different audience that we have to do a little bit different training to.
Absolutely. We talked about, too, in other segments and episodes of different shows, we talked about the elder abuse and how they're targeted as well. So that audience definitely would be well served to understand what this is and how it's, it targets them, how it's carried out toward them. So Tanya, you work with CoFence. You're the Chief Information Security Officer. Tell us what you're seeing from that kind of perspective, from the enterprise perspective.
So from the enterprise perspective, so you mentioned that we have 5 phishing defense centers, and so that has really given us some great insight into what our organization's really being targeted with. The number one threat that we see, as well it is with consumer, right, credential phish, right? Because with your credentials, I have power, right? And that is the top threat that we see. But then we also see some malware being delivered. And then we see the BEC, the business email compromise, but that has started to shift even to some conversation where maybe, we heard about some big breaches that happened in the last couple of years we talk about supply chain attacks. And so they go after small businesses that might not have the same protection, making their way into a larger organization, right? Because you're doing business with these small individual mom and pop businesses, right, that don't have the same controls, they don't have the same processes in place to double check things or know that it's coming from a spoofed website. So they might compromise that individual organization or get information from them, say, give me your accounts receivable register. And then now they have information about who they owe money to and the amounts of money, right? So now they're targeting those large organizations saying, hey, Becky's not with us today, or is no longer here. You need to pay me for this invoice that's past due, right? And so organizations can be taken by a threat actor who might be spoofing a business a well-known business, and so it becomes more and more challenging for somebody working in the finance department to know, is this really coming from this individual that I normally do business with? We also see them compromising an inbox, like getting access to an inbox to be able to set up forwarding rules to get messages forwarded to them based on keywords, looking for interactions that they're doing business with. Then they're able to take what we call reply chain. So using that existing email chain and then adding onto the conversation. So so the things that we used to tell people look for, do you know this person? Do you recognize the company? All the things that we tell people to look for have now gone, because now there's this thread of a conversation that was already happening with maybe somebody that they're familiar with, and now they're interacting with them and then potentially sending off, then sending them either links to malware or asking for money. So it becomes very complicated these days. It's not as simple as just looking out for things, right? We have to heighten our senses a little bit differently than what we did in the beginning when we were going after this phishing threat.
Absolutely. And Tanya, I love that you highlighted the small business aspect of it, how small businesses are targeted, and then what that can mean for not only them, but for the organizations that they serve.
Right.
I think a lot of times, because this is the scams that we've seen play out in the media have been the big ones.
Right.
Global companies in some cases, or national companies that are serving the entire nation. But those small businesses are at risk as well, and they're targeted for the exact reason that you stated, because they can provide access to a much bigger, target in
Right.
some cases.
Yeah.
So I think it's very important, because a lot of times they think, we're just a small mom and pop business. It's just us. Nobody really cares about us.
Right.
They're not targeting us. We don't have enough money. But actually, you're exactly who they're looking
Right.
for.
You're not the money that you have, but you're a resource to some of the bigger fish that they're after.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. When we come back, we'll talk more about phishing and how malicious actors are targeting consumers as well as businesses. We'll be right back.
Every organization is responsible for ensuring cybersecurity. The ability to protect its information systems from impairment or even theft is essential to success. Implementing effective security measures will not only offer liability protection, it will also increase efficiency and productivity. With our cybersecurity workshop, your participants will understand the different types of malware and security breaches. Develop effective prevention methods which will increase overall security. They'll also understand the basic concepts associated with cybersecurity and what a company needs to stay secure.
Find out more about training for you and your organization at vicargroup.com.
Welcome back to Down to Business with V. I'm your host, V, and today we're discussing phishing attempts. Gone phishing. Tales of taking the bait. We have in the studio with us today cybersecurity expert and Chief Information Security Officer for Cofense, Tanya Dudley. Tanya, thank you so much for being with us.
Thanks for having me. It's very exciting.
Yes, thank you so much. In the first segment, we talked a little bit about some of the FBI cases where phishing attempts have been carried out. And we also talked about how enterprises were being attacked, as well as small businesses, how they were being used to target their victims. In other FBI news, there was a man who pled guilty to a $1.1 million email phishing scam. We call it business email compromise sometimes in the industry, but that's a huge and hefty amount. And the reason we're highlighting these is to show our consumer base and our audience what this looks like when it carries out and what's at risk. In another case, there was a man that admitted to stealing Bitcoin on the dark web using these phishing schemes. And then there was another incident where a school district was duped out of $2 million due to a phishing scam. It's a lot of money.
Yeah, and unfortunately, those little entities, a school district, right? They don't have the same kind of funds that an organization might have, access to, right, to recover from that, or even the cybersecurity, the cyber insurance that we see many getting today. I know right at the beginning of the pandemic, that school district reminded me of something that I would see. We were trying to find COVID-related emails, right, because we didn't want our organizations to simulate them, but we wanted to show them what we were seeing. And right in the beginning, we came across one, and it was actually local to me. It was literally the school district was up the street, and I was like, I need to give this to our local FBI because the school district is being targeted. And so I, got permission from the customer that I could send that email off to the FBI, and the FBI was like, well, how do you know they're compromised? And I'm like, well, it's coming from their SharePoint site, right? It's directing. So I kind of take that to heart, right? When it becomes more passionate, right? When you know the victim, or somebody that's being targeted. Oftentimes they're just spraying, right? They're just going after whoever they can get access. So not always targeted. We do hear some big stories, right, where a large organization is targeted, especially when it comes to ransomware. But oftentimes it's just them spraying, many campaigns just spraying out the email campaign to, multiple organizations, multiple victims on the consumer side, just to seeing where they can get access to those credentials. Those credentials are so valuable to them. They can either use them themselves, or they could also bundle them and validate them and then sell them for even more money in the dark web.
Yes, that's what we're hearing a lot of too. So before we go too far into the topic, for those that might have missed that first segment where we went over what phishing is, can you please just recap for them what phishing is?
Yeah, so phishing is an email, or it could be a text message, or a voice message, right, that is going after, and sometimes we hear them using WhatsApp or a direct message through another platform. But at the end of the day, it's phishing. They're phishing for information to gain access to your financials or for your information.
Very interesting how they use these tactics. And I like that you said sometimes it's targeted, other times you called it the spray. They're just putting the information out there, seeing who will bite.
Right.
And who they can actually harvest information from.
Yeah.
So Tanya, I like the example that you shared with the school district. What else are you and CoFint seeing that's happening across the spectrum with enterprise or with consumers regarding phishing?
Yeah, so credential phish is the top thing that we see, right? Because with the credentials, now threat actors, especially if they are targeting an organization, right, we don't see the downfall. But what we do see is that when we look at metrics for an incident, major incident, like incident response metric is mean time to detect. And so what we see when we look at organizations like Mandiant or CrowdStrike, when they do incident response for these organizations, they measure how long does it take before they detected the incident, right? Before they detected something was wrong. And oftentimes it starts with phishing, right? And what we have seen is a dramatic drop in that. And that is because organizations have started to educate their employees on how to detect phishing emails and then to report those. Those are so critical that your security operations teams get access to those phishing emails, right? So they can look for, did anybody interact with it? Who else got this message? Can we block the website that it might be going to? And look for some of the other indicators that might be in that message. So it's critical that you look for those messages and report those off to your security teams to be able to get those taken down and to mitigate that phishing threat. Right.
We talked in one brief that I did, a cybersecurity awareness brief, about the human firewall. And we're talking about this right now from the enterprise perspective, but an enterprise is built of one individual at a time. Talk to the individual in an organization, because most of our viewers have jobs.
Right.
They're working in an organization.
Right.
And a lot of times, even though the phishing awareness goes out, sometimes they aren't really taking it seriously. It's just a check in the box.
Right.
And they're writing things off. Tell them what the potential is, like what to look for, and then what the potential is if they miss and click and bite the bait.
So what to look for is, looking for, should you be interacting with this person, right? And I talked a little bit in the first segment about they're getting harder to detect, right? Because the threat actors are, originally we used to tell them, look for grammar, look for things that they don't have those anymore, right? Because they have phishing kits. They've done a better job of scraping real emails. They know what cloud service alerts look like, so they're able to mimic those very well. So at the end of the day, is this somebody that you should be interacting with? And then just really taking the time to understand, should you be interacting with that? And then reporting that message, because it's so critical for your team to get that. And sometimes it might just take picking up the phone and say, did you mean to send this to me? I'm not sure. I'm not sure this is something that I should be receiving from you. Because sometimes if they're asking, especially if they're asking for you to interact with them, via cell phone, sometimes they might say, send me your cell phone number and I'll text you. They're trying to get you off of that medium. So just really paying attention to, should I be interacting with this? Is this somebody that I do business with? Is this even a cloud service that our organization uses? There were some interesting ones phishing emails that we saw last year where they were using SurveyMonkey to send out an invoice. So if you're in finance, you know that the person you're doing business with isn't going to send you an invoice via a SurveyMonkey survey link, right? So sometimes the clues are pretty easy to find. Threat actors are trying to get creative in the places where they're trying to send you things from, and other times it's just it's kind of difficult to realize. So if you've given out your credentials, it's still not too late to let your security team know, right, so that they can have you reset your password, and then also look to make sure that the threat actor hasn't also set up forwarding rules in your inbox, making sure that those messages aren't getting forwarded outside of your organization. And another thing that we recommend organizations do, or even small businesses, right, turn off that auto forwarding capability within your Outlook so that they can't even send those off premise. So that way, information isn't being leaked out, as well as those emails that might give a threat actor a heads up on, some of the things that they can look for and to spoof that organization.
Tanya, I love that you touched on, turning off the forwarding rules and those sorts of things as, preemptive measures that we can take. Let's talk in the 3 minutes that we have left about internal threat actors, what that looks like, and what employees should be looking for. Because a lot of times most of times it's an external threat actor. But what happens in the case of an internal threat actor? Tell them what they should be looking for.
Just is it something you're expecting from that person, right? Are they asking you for something that's outside of the normal business that you interact with them, right? If they're in the finance department, why are they asking you about something that has, legal, or something that doesn't even have anything to do with what it is that their normal day-to-day. Oftentimes what we see, especially when it's business email compromise, is asking for a direct deposit change. So going in and sending it to the payroll department, from spoofing an internal employee. Actually, this was something that we, when we were doing a BEC webinar last year, my boss said, go find some emails in one of our customers and then just interact with them. So I did that, right, just to see what it was they were asking for, and it went down to the gift card. But in my research of pulling out some of these emails, I found where the person, the threat actor, actually knew who the payroll person was. They were able to find them on LinkedIn, and then spoofed the employee who also worked for that organization. So they were able to, use some other social engineering mechanisms to make that email look legitimate, to interact with that. So we also then recommend to people, make sure your employees know there's only one way that they can change their bank account. Most of organizations have an online portal where you can go in and set up your direct deposit. But a few months ago, I actually found a threat actor said, hey, I couldn't get my information to change on the portal. Can you change it? Here's my bank. Can I send you a canceled copy, right? So just as we try to mitigate these threats, the threat actors are also trying to find ways to still make their way through to get you to interact with them.
Yeah, the landscape is constantly changing. And this is why a lot of times we repeat information or bring awareness to a topic again. It's because they are constantly changing their tactics.
Right.
As soon as, like you said, we update and bring awareness, they are finding the next hurdle or the next way in the loophole
Right.
to get in and carry out an attempt. And I love that you touched on the social engineering piece with LinkedIn and other social sites where, you know, generally you're posting information for one reason, but the malicious actor is going there gleaning information so that they could carry out a targeted attack
Right.
against either a consumer, a person, individual,
Right.
or an organization. So being very careful what we post, how we post, and you know, and why we post it.
That's right. Yeah, and we even, like, we have a simulation product, right? So to be able to train. And so we are always telling our customers, make sure you're looking at the latest threats so that your employees are in tune with what the latest threats are. Like, making up something doesn't do them any good, right? Give them something that's real that you're seeing in your environment.
Absolutely. Tanya Dudley, Chief
you.
Information Security Officer for CoFence, Executive Committee Member for the National Cybersecurity Alliance. Thank you so much for what you do every day. We certainly do appreciate you.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
I'd like to thank our guest, Tanya Dudley, Chief Information Security Officer of CoFence. Thank you for sharing your insight and expertise with our audience today. We certainly do appreciate you. If you or anyone you know has been a victim of a scam, an account compromise, account takeover, be sure to visit your local police department to report it or visit the FBI at ic3.gov. We'd like to thank our sponsor, Vicar Group, LLC, business consultants for Generation U. You can visit them at vicargroup.com. If you'd like to sponsor the show, be a guest on the show, or if you have show ideas, be sure to visit us at dtbwithv.com. I'd like to thank our crew today, Eric, Hannah, Peter, Stephen, Doug, and Suzanne, for all you do to make this show possible. We certainly do appreciate you. I'm your host, V. This is Down to Business with V. We'll see you next time.